We begin with an update in the inflation showdown. The new Consumer Price Index report is out. It shows overall cost of goods and services cooled off in April, but we were still in better shape a year ago. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Brian Abel.
And I'm Glenda Lewis. Americans are relieved to see inflation heading in the right direction. But as Scripps News correspondent Chris Stewart explains, it might not be enough for the Federal Reserve to cut rates.
Americans may be feeling a little relief, but inflation is still above levels that would bring a cut to high interest rates. After 3 straight months of the rate of inflation rising, the latest Consumer Price Index report shows inflation cooling a bit in April. Prices are down from 3.5% in March. The core measure of inflation, which strips out volatile food and energy costs, has fallen to the lowest annual level in 3 years.
It feels like this could be the path toward inflation that behaves more normally.
Encouraging news on consumer prices, sending the S&P 500 and NASDAQ soaring to record highs by midday Wednesday. But President Biden isn't celebrating. A statement from the White House saying battling inflation is his top economic priority and prices are still too high. Motor vehicle insurance is up more than 22% year over year. Gas prices jumped last month. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the retail gas price in March was $3.54, shooting up to $3.73 in April. And the cost of clothing also rising more than 1%. Despite this, grocery prices fell last month, providing some relief for Americans hit hard on necessities. Egg prices dropped more than 7%. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says recent inflation numbers have made him cautious about cutting interest rates too quickly.
Right now, the expectation is that September is the best bet for that to begin happening.
Chris Stewart, Scripps News.
And Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, is joining us here now. Paul, let's kind of start by simplifying this for our viewers. Help us understand what the CPI report really means for the everyday American.
So most people don't even know what CPI stands for, let alone like what it means. Right. But if you go to the grocery store, you drive by a gas station, you pay auto insurance, that's what people I think really feel and can see those prices continue to ebb and flow and for the most part still be higher than what they were traditionally a few years ago before COVID.
Okay, so inflation is cooling, a step in the right direction, at least Wall Street today certainly thought so. Yeah, right. So do you think it's enough to push the Reserve to cut interest rates for us at some point coming up?
I don't think so. The Fed is in a very tight window where they have basically June and July to make a decision. And the reason why is they're an independent board of the government. So if it gets too close to the election, they don't want to get into the politics of a rate cut. So that's one reason why if they don't make the rate cuts in June or July potentially, then they're probably going to have to wait until after election.
Okay. So inflation, of course, it's hitting everybody's wallets. Retirees, they are not immune either. They're at risk of running out of cash. So what is your advice for retirees or maybe even folks that are looking to retire in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, so as far as retirees go, one of the things that I see this over and over is people still have a chunk of money in their JP Morgan, Huntington, everyday checking account. And most people don't realize if they only move that to a high yield savings account that's paying 4.5%, 5%, that's at that Fed rate, they can offset some of the impact of inflation. The other thing that I see often is when people think about retirement, they go from a very aggressive or somewhat aggressive asset allocation where they're in stocks to being all in bonds. But one of the greatest inflation hedges is being in the stock market. It's just you don't want to be a retiree and being 60, 70% in stocks. You want to pull that offensive nature back a little bit and not be as aggressive.
A diverse portfolio.
Yes, very diverse portfolio. That's paying dividends and interest.
All right. Paul Fenner, Tama Capital. Appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.